So the commandments in Christ's time were vitally important, but they were used as almost a legalistic kind of measuring stick. There were those that lied to themselves saying, well, you know what, I've kept all of these commandments. I can do this. But the twofold purpose of the 10 Commandments that God gave was not only to show how his people were to live in holy relationship with him, but the impossibility of them doing it on their own. The 10 Commandments demonstrated this need for a Savior, someone that could help us to actually achieve these commandments, to follow them, and when we fail in following them, to have a place of forgiveness. We're going to be looking at the 9th commandment today. You shall not bear false witness against your neighbor. You may have heard it simply as you shall not lie. But that second part of it is vitally important. You shall not bear false witness against your neighbor, because God redirects our attention not necessarily from ourselves, but mostly now to our neighbors and ourselves. When we lie, we don't just damage ourselves, we also damage those around us. God is reminding us that we live in community as believers, and the sin of one affects many. There's a story about a pastor at the turn of the century who was walking in a major metropolitan area, and he came across some boys, and they were all surrounding a dog, a little puppy. And he asked them, boys, what are you doing? And they said, well, we're seeing who can tell the biggest lie, and whoever tells the biggest lie wins the dog. And the pastor looks at him and he goes, oh my goodness, boys. When I was your age, I never would have thought of doing something like that. And all of them go, oh man, I guess you win the dog, because they recognize that he was absolutely lying, absolutely telling an untruth. And when we hear stories like that, we have to understand a story like that isn't a lie. Now, what the pastor did was, but the story itself isn't a lie. They make those kind of stories make us laugh. Now, look, here's a better one. Okay, I was at the pet store yesterday. I went to Petland. I had to buy some dog food for my dog, so I picked up a 40-pound bag of dog food, and I'm standing in line with this 40-pound bag of dog food. And there's a lady behind me, and she comes up and she goes, "Do you have a dog?" Immediately, my flesh wants to respond. Okay, so I repented later. But I said, no, I don't have a dog. I said, recently I got out of the hospital and I wanted to go back and try this diet I was on. I call it the Purina diet. And I'll tell you, it's fantastic. I lost 30 pounds on this diet. And her eyes are getting all big. And she's like, what? I said, oh yeah, it's nutritionally balanced. It's relatively inexpensive, because all you do is fill your pockets with pieces of dog food, and wherever you're hungry, you pull out a couple and you pop them in your mouth and you eat them. I lost 30 pounds. It was fantastic. She goes, oh my goodness, is that why you ended up in the hospital? And I'm like, oh, no. I didn't end up in the hospital because of that. I ended up in the hospital because after I bought the dog food the first time, I walked out in the parking lot, and when I was stopped and scratched some fleas, I got hit by a car. There's a funnier joke later, okay? But is that a lie? No, because my intent isn't to deceive. Those are just stories. They're ways we have fun. I'm not trying to mislead you with those kinds of stories, because I'm pretty sure you know those weren't true, right? Okay, just checking, okay? Lying involves intention. And it's interesting where that intention comes from. You know, look, a statement that is technically true, but we tell it and it's misleading, that's a lie. False impressions that we give, that we don't correct, those are lies. Half-truths that distort the whole truth, those are lies. But where do those come from? Go to Matthew chapter 15. Turn real quick to Matthew chapter 15, first book in the New Testament. Real quick show of hands. Who has a Bible app that they use in church? Okay, all sorts of you. We need to contact the Bible app companies, okay, and tell them that they need to put page flipping sounds on their Bible apps. Okay? I miss that. I love that sound when a congregation is flipping through their Bible so you can hear it. It's not as beautiful. Okay? But look at Matthew chapter 15, and I want you to look at verse 18. It's going to tell us where these lies come from. Matthew 15, verse 18. This is Jesus himself speaking. He says, "But those things which proceed out of the mouth come from the heart, and they defile a man." Okay? Look, if you want to tune out after this, you're more than welcome. But if you take away anything today, anything from this morning, I want you to understand, lying words that come out of our mouths begin in our heart. It's not about the words. It's about the heart. And the only way to fix lying mouths is by fixing a lying heart. The only way to correct deception is to correct the deception that I have here in my heart. So we're going to be examining this whole idea of lying today. Aren't you glad you came? Because if there is one sin that I believe all of us have committed, it is this. We've committed either blatantly or by omission, but you're going to see that each of them can be equally damning. And this is why God tells us and warns us against it. We've been trying to watch different movies as a family. That's difficult, by the way, as a family to find something you can watch. But we watched Cars the other day. I love Cars. I love Mater in Cars. And because I'm kind of odd, I always pick very peculiar things to be my favorite part of a movie. And my favorite part in all of Cars is when Lightning McQueen is locked up in the impound lot and Mater tries to let him out and the sheriff pulls up and he says, "Mater, what did I tell you about that?" And he says, "To not to." I love that. That is my absolute favorite part. The whole time I'm preparing this, I'm thinking, what did God tell us about lying? To not to. Okay? So we're to not to. We're to not to lie. Okay? I know it's grammatically incorrect, but it's funny. And if it helps you remember it, great. To not to. Okay? So what is the harm then in lying? Why do you think God has this prohibition or this barrier, these guardrails, if you will, around our lives that prohibit lying? Well, first of all, I want you to understand, lying harms society. Lying harms us as a society, just as it would have harmed the Israelites. God gave the 10 Commandments to not to lie, being one of them, okay, to preserve the community, to preserve the nation of Israel, and to help it flourish. In order for it to achieve what it needed to achieve, this was one of the key aspects that the nation needed to possess. It needed to be truthful. It needed to be truthful. We see in Exodus chapter 23, flip over just real quickly to the right there, Exodus 23 in verses 1 and 2, that God incorporates this idea of truth-telling and the importance of it into the legal system of the Israelites. Exodus 23, beginning in verse 1, "You shall not circulate a false report." Don't lie. Don't spread rumors. Do not put your hand with the wicked to be an unrighteous witness. You shall not follow a crowd to do evil, nor shall you testify in a dispute so as to turn aside after many to pervert justice. You shall not show partiality to a poor man in this dispute. We are not to spread false reports. And yet, guys, we live in a day and age where lying is pervasive. It's pervasive in politics. where it influences policies. Much of our popular culture is based on lies about beauty, about morality, about fame, about happiness, about gender. It's all based on lies. Even the economy is affected by lying. We see corporations come and they use dishonest business practices, or they exaggerate their returns. They will come and they'll misrepresent loss or risk. All of this undermines an economy. Does this sound familiar? We're not in a recession. That's a lie. And the hard part is, guys, we need to understand how that damages us as a society. We can recognize that people are going to lie. But what happens when a society is so willing to believe the lies, even when they know they're not true? Lying harms society, but it also weakens our communities. In the workplace, in schools, in church, false rumors, jumping to conclusions, hidden motives, dancing around the truth, all of it sows distrust and discord. Jesus tells us that the world is going to know who he is by our love, the church's love by one another. Guys, when we lie to each other, spread rumors about one another, the world looks at us and goes, well, if that's Jesus, I don't want any part of that. Lying harms society. It harms our communities. It also harms our families. When children lie, their parents can't trust them. When parents lie, the children are insecure and discouraged. When spouses lie, the very foundation of marriage suffers and becomes unstable. Telling the truth is unbelievably important because lying harms society, but it also harms individuals. Lying harms individuals. That's why God puts in there that clarifier that you shall not bear false witness against your neighbor. You know, when I was in the military, one of the things we had to study a lot of was what made a just war. And I know it may seem counterintuitive, but nations have come together and said, even when that there are right ways to make war, that you can do something so bad in war that it's considered a war crime. And they identify things that we're not going to do in war because they're just too despicable. Poison gas, frangible bullets, those sorts of things. Things that cause unnecessary suffering. That is how lying and rumor spreading and being untruthful should be in our relationships. And yet, lying is one of the primary weapons that is used against our enemies. We seek to degrade their reputation. We seek to spread lies and rumors about them. And guys, I want you to understand this is nothing new. David had this happen to him as well. King David. In Psalm 31, beginning in verse 10, David says this. He says, "My life is consumed by anguish, and my years by groaning. My strength fails because of my affliction, and my bones grow weak. Because of all of my enemies, I am the utter contempt of my neighbors. For I hear the slander of many. Let me not be put to shame, O Lord, for I have cried out to you. But let the wicked be put to shame and lie silent in the grave. Let their lying lips be silenced. For with pride and contempt they speak arrogantly against the righteous." Now there's a twofold lesson there. One, we need to understand that lying happens and how damaging it can be to us as individuals. Two, we need to understand that is a great way to deal with people that lie about us. Pray to God and say, "Lord, I need you to be the one that fights for me. I need you to be the one that silences their lips. Their lips are lying. They are coming after your property. Silence them, Lord." Lying damages individuals. Rumor, innuendo, half-truth, spinning the truth in a way that makes others look bad. All of those things can destroy. Why would we do something like that? Why would somebody else do it? Maybe they feel like we deserve to be hurt. Maybe they feel like this is payback. Why do we do it? Well, maybe we just don't like them. Maybe we don't agree with the particular sin that they are participating in. We've come and we consider them enemies of God, even though Jesus said, love your enemies and do good to them. Lying harms enemies, but lying can also harm our friends. This is the challenging one. People talk about little white lies. We convince ourselves that sometimes lying is the loving thing to do. You want to know where we do that the most? When we have unsaved friends or unsaved family members. We don't want to speak the truth to them because it's going to be awkward. It might hurt the relationship. So the loving thing to do is just not talk about it at all. And yet ultimately when we do that, when we refuse to share the gospel, when we refuse to come to someone and tell them that their sins are keeping them separated from a holy and perfect God, and if they were to die today, they would spend eternity separated from that God that loves them with his wrath poured out on them for eternity. When we refuse to do that, guess who we really love? Us. We love us. Because we're not willing to tell them the truth that'll save them, the truth that'll set them free, the truth that'll pluck them, as the word says, out of the fire. We love ourselves. So we tell those little white lies. We tell the white lie, the white lie when someone hurts us with their words. No, it didn't bother me at all. And we allow that to fester. We tell someone, oh, no, that meal was fantastic. Some of the best stuff I've ever had. But we justify it because we want to be nice or we want to be diplomatic. When what we need to learn to do is share the truth in love. To share the truth in a loving and kind way. Maybe that friend doesn't want a direct answer. And we should be sensitive to that. But I will tell you, more lies told in the name of sensitivity cause truth to be doubted and devalued. That's what those kind of lies do. In Proverbs 26:28 says, a lying tongue hates those it hurts, and a flattering mouth works ruin. Do you love the people around you? Do you love your parents? Do you love your kids? Do you love your friends enough to tell them the truth about the gospel? To tell them the truth about salvation? Do you love them enough not to lie? A lady had gone to Europe and she calls her husband as she's getting ready to board the plane. And she says, how's my cat? And he goes, it's dead. And she is absolutely despondent. She's like, she's like, why didn't you break the news to me slowly? Why would you just blurt it out like that? I mean, you could have said when I first called, oh, the cat's up on the roof. And then when I called you from Paris, you could have said, the cat's down, but he's acting a little sluggish. And then when I called you from New York, you could have said, yeah, he wasn't doing too good, so I had to take him to the vet. And then when you picked me up at the airport, then you could have said, your cat died. Then it would have been easier. You would have lessened the blow. And he's like, honey, I am so sorry. You're absolutely right. Please forgive me. I will do my best not to do that. And I'll try harder. I'll do better next time. And she says, that's fine. It's fine. Hey, how's my mom? And there's a long pause, and he says, she's up on the roof. Now, I will tell you, this morning, if you had come in about 6:45, you would have thought I was nuts because I was in my office just dying. I thought that was the funniest thing. I was really laughing. That one was for me, I guess. Okay? So we need to understand that a true friend, a true love, a spouse tells the truth even when it's hard. Even when it means the relationship might be broken. We tell the truth. We tell the truth. We don't tell it in a cold, cruel, uncaring way, but we tell it lovingly. And that's especially true when a friend needs correction. Proverbs 27, verses 5 through 6 says it this way: better is open rebuke than hidden love. Wounds from a friend can be trusted. I love that. Wounds from a friend can be trusted. I've had men come and tell me things, and man, I didn't want to believe it, and they told me. And at the end of it all, I was like, that really hurt. But thank you for telling me, because I needed to hear the truth. I needed to hear the truth. But there's a second part of that. As believers, not only are we to be truth speakers, but we have to be willing to receive the truth. That's why so many people are scared to speak the truth in love. It's because what the response from the person they love is going to be. One of my favorite movies is A Few Good Men, and the famous line from A Few Good Men, truth. You can't handle the truth. That's how a lot of us are. And what's worse, some of us are great at speaking the truth to people, but not being real accepting to hear it ourselves. If we want truth, we have to welcome truth. We have to welcome it. And if you're fortunate enough to have a friend or a spouse who tells you the truth in love, treasure that friendship. And if you're not, endeavor to be that friend in someone's life. Be willing to speak the truth. Because that hard truth that they're able to talk demonstrates their love and how much they care about you. Lying harms society, it harms individuals, but it also harms us. Lying harms our integrity, it harms our character, it harms and degrades the essence of who we are. Because let me help you with something. If you lie, even a small lie, you're a liar. If you lie, you're a liar. Now, if you know Jesus Christ, yep, my sins are forgiven, past, present, future. I'm a forgiven liar. But when I lie as a born-again believer, it doesn't break my relationship with God, but it most certainly damages my fellowship with Him. It most certainly damages my fellowship with Him. I can't lose my salvation. My God is stronger than that. But it most certainly hurts my fellowship with Him. It makes it harder for Him to teach me. And here's the real key. It makes me virtually unusable by Him. And I don't know about you, but I want to stay teachable so that He can use me for His work. Lying harms us. And like marijuana is a gateway drug to other drugs, lying is a gateway sin to other sins. It destroys our defenses against moral ruin. Proverbs 11:3 puts it this way. It says, the integrity of the upright guides them, but the unfaithful are destroyed by their duplicity. That's why the Bible says that a double-minded man is unstable in all of his ways. I've never known an addict, whether to alcohol or drugs or gambling or pornography, whose addiction did not involve lying to others, but also to themselves. Lying is a contributing factor to most adulterous affairs, overspending, obsessions of any kind, placing anything over and above God in a person's life. It begins with lying. And I will tell you, most people who are bitter or abusive or selfish, they refuse to face the truth that they have a problem. They lie to themselves. And if we lie to ourselves, our lives spin out of control. Lying harms society, it harms individuals, and it harms ourselves. Now, I may not have told you anything you didn't already know. But the real question is, how can we become truth tellers? How can we become truth speakers? Well, the first thing we got to do is diagnose the problem. Am I a liar? Let me help you. Yes, you are. Okay? How can I say that? Well, researchers have even shown that most people can't go through a 10-minute conversation without lying. University of Maryland did a study, and they had people come in, they set them down, and they had them carry on a 10-minute benign conversation about anything they wanted to. They showed it back to them. Upwards of 60% of the people of this study could not go 10 minutes without telling a lie. 60%. Now, they weren't huge lies. You know, people didn't sit down and go, hello, I'm Abraham Lincoln. Okay? But most of the lies were told to make them look better or more likable. No big deal. Or is it? Because I will tell you, if we can rationalize those kind of lies, we can rationalize any kind. Most people lie. It's just part of the conversation. I didn't exactly lie. I just didn't tell the whole story. The truth wouldn't have worked for me. I'm not really hurting anybody when I stretch the truth a little. Or here's the big one. That's just my truth. Most of the craziness going on in our nation right now is because of that. What's your truth? Just speak your truth. Guys, let me help you. If your truth is contrary to what this truth says, then your truth is a lie. And we have to be lovingly bold in telling people that. And not compromising. Not compromising. We rationalize these things, but the first thing that we need to understand is that the devil is the father of lies. It is Satan's fault. Okay? Now, when I say that, I'm not giving you an out. That doesn't mean when you lie that the devil made you do it. That he twisted your arm. Oh, no, and you had to lie. Okay? Anytime we sin, anytime we choose to do so, it's on us. Okay? But what we are great at is believing the devil's lies about lying. He's the best there is. He lies about everything. You know, the fall of humanity began with him telling a lie. You'll be like God. You'll know good from evil. Go for it. Jesus said of the devil, he was a murderer from the beginning, not holding to the truth, for there is no truth in him. When he lies, he speaks his native language. I love that. He's fluent in lies. So we need to learn to recognize his lies and then not believe them. There's four big lies that the devil tells about lies. You ready? Here they are. The devil says it's easier to lie. That's not true. That's true. While it might be easier in the moment, a life built on lies is like a house of cards. You're having to spend your whole time to try and keep that thing up before it collapses in on itself. And it normally takes more lies. It normally takes a lot more work to keep this fabricated life intact. Lying is not easier. You know, it's attributed to Mark Twain. They're not sure if he said it, but someone said, always tell the truth and you won't have to remember anything. Isn't that great? Because if you tell a lie, not only do you have to remember that lie, but you've got to remember all the other lies you're going to have to tell to make sure that that lie is believed. Lying is never easier. That's one of the lies that we believe from the devil that helps us choose to lie. The second one is the devil says lying is the loving way to handle awkward situations. It's the loving way. Yep, you're going to love them right to hell. Good job. That's not true. Lying is the coward's way of handling relationships. It's the coward's way. If you really care about someone, you'll make the effort to tell them the truth in a loving way. The third way, the devil says lying is a good way to avoid negative consequences. Lie and you'll get out of it. Not true. If a lie is revealed, it normally leads to greater anger, punishment, alienation. How many parents have said, if you had just told me the truth, this would have been a lot better, but you compounded what happened with a lie. Now I got to hammer you, right? Well, that must just be me then. Thank you. Appreciate that. But absolutely, it always makes things worse. Even if the lie remains hidden, there's always that fear of being exposed. You're always looking behind your back. You're always waiting. You've got unresolved guilt. If you're a Christian, you've got conviction. The fourth one is the devil says lying is no big deal. People do it all the time. And while he might be right, most people do lie. The fact that many people do it isn't a justification for it. Jesus said in Matthew 7:13, enter through the narrow gate, for wide is the gate and broad is the road that leads to destruction, and many enter through it. And while he was directly talking about salvation in that regard, it also applies to the behaviors that are born out of our sanctification in becoming more and more Christ-like. If most of the world is lying, Christians who are commanded to be truth speakers need to be different. We need to be different. Lies are from the devil. God stands for truth. Look, turn to Ephesians chapter 5. Go to Ephesians 5. I want to show you something. I thought this was pretty amazing when I read it. Ephesians 5, beginning in verse 8. Paul, writing to the church at Ephesus, explaining to them an aspect of their salvation, explaining to them part of their identity in Christ. You ready? Ephesians 5, beginning in verse 8. For you were once darkness. Now, look what he says. He doesn't say you were in darkness. He said you were darkness. That means everything about darkness defined you before Christ. Now look at what he goes on to say. But now you are light in the Lord. It doesn't say you're in the light of the Lord. It says you are light. Everything that I need to obey God, to honor God, to glorify God, I now have inside me. Because God himself indwells me. God himself is there. He goes on to say, walk as children of light, for the fruit of the Spirit is in all goodness, righteousness, and truth, finding out what is acceptable to the Lord, and have no fellowship with the unfruitful works of darkness, but rather expose them. We are to expose them, not have anything to do with them. So today we need to ask ourselves, do we believe what God says or what the devil says? Do we believe the lies the devil's told us, or do we believe what God has told us to do? Whom do we trust, God or Satan? So the first thing we need to do, identify the problem. The second thing we need to do is seek help. If I want to be a truth teller, I got to identify the problem. The problem is me, and then I need to seek help. You're caught in a sticky situation. You have a half second to decide whether to tell the truth or to tell a lie. What's going to come out of your mouth? As we said back in Matthew 15, Jesus said, the things that come out of a person's mouth come from the heart, for out of the heart come evil thoughts, murder, adultery, sexual immorality, theft, false testimony, slander. In order to be more truthful, we need to have God change the inclination and habits of our hearts. Paul comes and he's writing to the church at Colossae, and he says, do not lie to each other. You've taken off the old self with its practices, and you've put on a new self, which is being renewed in the knowledge and the image of the Creator. That's not who you are anymore. If you're a born-again believer, you don't need to lie. You're a truth speaker. You're no longer darkness. You're light. That is who we have become. Lying, falsehoods, all of that is a habit of the old self. I have been made new. I am a new creature, transformed by God himself. This journey toward being a truth teller is a spiritual journey. As with all sins, we can confess it to God. We repent. We do it honestly. We do it truthfully. We do it without excuse. We might need to correct some of the untruths that we've told to other people. We establish new ways of dealing with those sticky situations to where we begin allowing God to be the one that determines what our words are. And most importantly, we allow God to be the one that transforms our hearts and minds.